going to start this sermon off by saying, I think that Disney has messed us up. I think that this idea of, and they're nice stories, don't get me wrong, but how it always ends is the same. They lived happily ever after, right? And typically, if you have like the prince and the princess, they go through the struggle, they go through the evil witches, they go through the step-grandmothers, they go through all those things. And then after all is said and done, it's just all the problems stop. And now they're just able to be together in perfect harmony for the rest of their lives. And then you bring that to reality, and we bring that to our real life relationships, and our marriages, and our friendships, and our relationships with each other, and we'll get to our relationship with God. We sometimes think that we should just live happily ever after, which means we get to just sit on the couch, there's no more problems, there's no more issues, there's no more trials, there's no more new discoveries, none of that happens anymore. We're just riding off in the sunset. And I was talking to an older gentleman, and he was talking about, his life and some of his business successes, and he talked about how he sold his ranch for a lot of money. And he said, then we just bought a small little house, and we were just going to live happily ever after. We didn't have to work anymore. We were chilling. And then he said, about a year of that, I couldn't do it. They sold that house, bought another ranch, still working to this day. And the reason why I bring that up is whenever we think about our relationships with one another and our relationship with God, happily ever after does not happen in this life. And I feel like we know that intuitively, but we still desire it sometimes. And we think our relationships shouldn't be difficult. And we don't recognize that our relationships require work. And whenever me and Sky first got married, I personally got some of the most polarizing advice. For some people, they were like, man, this is it. I mean, you made it, and everything's just going to go, real smooth from here on out. Then you got the other side, is like, man, this is a war. Good luck. This is just try your best. Polarizing advice. And I really wish people were just more in the middle and just say, it's going to have its challenges, but it's going to have its benefits. But it will have its challenges. Additionally, new challenges come up in each of our different phases of life. It was different whenever we first got married. It was different whenever we started having children. It was different whenever little things were going on with different people that were affecting us. And things were just different. And we had to work with each other differently. And we had to learn each other because we were both changing. And the reason why I bring that up is that has same qualities of our relationship with God and His relationship with us. But if we come in desiring this happily ever after where we just get to coast, sit on the couch, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to ride it out, it really doesn't work that way. And I think, actually, that frankly, God hasn't designed it that way. He doesn't really want it that way. Another thing, we're still introducing, sometimes we desire our relationship with God to be transactional. And what I mean by that is, well, if I'm good enough, life is not going to be too difficult. This won't happen. This will be okay, if I'm good enough. And God doesn't work that way. Once again, I think we know that intuitively, but we have a desire that, okay, if I'm faithful enough, God's not going to make me struggle as much as I don't want to. It doesn't work that way. In our relationships with one another, it doesn't work that way. Life just happens. We say life happens. Life just happens, and we have to work through it, and we have to deal with it. And me personally, I'll be very frank and honest with y'all. I had that mentality. But my mentality towards that was particularly with knowledge and understanding. I thought, okay, if I study hard enough, if I really focus, if I make sure my hermeneutic is pinpoint, perfect, everything is just right, then I'll finally get to understand, and I'll just coast off and be like, I know it. And it wasn't until very recently that I realized it doesn't work that way. At least not for me. Maybe y'all figured it out, at least not for me. And unfortunately, sometimes it seems like the more I learn, the more muddy and confusing things get for me. And I had to let go of the idea that this learning thing with God is probably going to be lifelong. I'm going to have my convictions. I'm going to have my things where I'm like, yeah, the evidence to me points this way. But there are some things, I say it, I'll never see. And it might be like that for quite some time, different things. Does that mean that I don't think God is going to save me? Does that mean that I don't think God is he's just looking down at me angry? Why doesn't he get this? I don't think so. But I think that does mean that God is looking at me and saying, he's trying. We're working together. And so we're concluding our theme this month of working with God, participation with God. And I want to kind of zoom out a little bit for this lesson and think about the idea of faithfulness to God. And that's in our whole lives, our whole life. Faithfulness to God. Participation with God through just being faithful Christians. And when we think about being faithful, that word, as soon as I said it, I'm sure that many of y'all may have had different understandings and interpretations of what I mean by being faithful to God. For many, being faithful means showing up. For many, being faithful means being at 100% of the time. For many, being faithful just means make sure you do this over here doesn't really matter, but just make sure you're doing these, core things. And I want to make a case for faithfulness being trusting in God and sticking with him no matter what happens. Trusting in God and sticking with him no matter what happens. Because the reality is, life is going to happen. Things are going to be difficult. And frankly, we'll get to in just a moment, things are going to be good too. But we can't forget God in whatever spectrum of life that we're in. That's right. We want to be faithful. And God is going to be working with us, we'll get to that in just a moment, working with us just in our faithfulness. In our regular old, monotonous Tuesday night, we were talking about the other day, just a sort of Tuesday night for a regular person looks like. In that, God wants us to be faithful. He wants us to be faithful. So the first passage I want to consider is Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, we know this one well. But I want this to serve as essentially the backdrop for this whole lesson. Hebrews chapter 11. Baker, if you can read verse number 6. What does that say?
But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
He that comes to God, believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Once again, I want to make this point. Life is going to happen. Things are going to be difficult. Things are going to be boring. Things are going to be exciting. Things are going to be comfortable. Things are going to be that's just life. But in each of those aspects, God still wants us to seek him. Still wants us to seek him. The other one I want to think about is Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. Logan, when you get there, read verse number 10. Whenever we talk about being faithful unto death, we have this, now it's 6 steps of salvation now, where hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, hear, believe, repent, confess. Always got to add, live faithful, right? And the passage that's there is Revelation chapter 2 and verse number 10. But it's always quoted, the end of it. But what about the entire verse? Really the kind of context, but for the sake of time, what does that verse say? Revelation 2 verse number 10.
Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life.
Jesus saying it's going to be hard. You're going to go to prison. They're going to throw you in prison. There's going to be tribulation. You're going to be tested. And then we have this moment where you say, well, if Jesus is king and he has all power, why didn't he just take that tribulation away? Why does he make it easier? And that's not the point. He said, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. And it was my friend Evan Nicholas. He did a Devo at BCS, and he made this point, and he said, for some of us, be faithful means make sure you go to church and just sit on your couch. But in that context, they were about to die. They were about to be thrown in prison. They were about to suffer. Death was really right there. And in that context, Jesus said, be faithful. Trust me. Trust me. Be faithful. Stick with me. Stay in relationship with me. Don't give up. And when we think about giving up, me and Scott were talking the other day about some individuals that, they're in longer term relationships. They're in a relationship for a year and a half, whatever. And then they break up with that person, and then a few weeks later, a month later, they're with somebody else. And she's like, it's weird how people just kind of go in and out of a relationship like that. And I said, that's because dudes are checked out of their relationship about 6 months prior before they break up. They're checked out. And then eventually they just break up because, okay, I'm just kind of tired of checking out. I have something else I want to do. And we do that with God. We're here. Our bodies are here. But sometimes we're just checked out. And then we say, I wonder what happened. They were checked out. We are checked out. And so when we're talking about being faithful, now I have to say this. I think being here is important and it is commendable. It is absolutely commendable. But being here is not everything. And it does not fully encapsulate our relationship with God. And when we think about not being checked out, we're talking about being faithful. Being faithful to God. Continuing to trust Him and continuing to be in relationship with Him. So that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about being faithful to God and participating with Him. Now, I have to go through this. We're talking about participation with God, and the idea is to implore us to obey God, not just because He said so, not just because we don't want to be eternally lost, but because God is imploring us to participate with Him in what He has done and what He continues to do. Participation with God. We want to have that relationship with Him, and He wants to have a relationship with us. So, we're talking about being faithful. Go to Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1. Brother Jeremy, if you can read Philippians chapter 1 and read verses 3 through 7. A little bit of a larger chunk.
I thank my God.
Not yet. Set it up. Thinking about Philippians chapter 1. And this is important because we're going to see Paul's sentiment towards his brethren. And he's going to make the point, God is working with you. He's working with you. Now what does it say?
I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine making requests for you all with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that He who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Just as it is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in my chains and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you are my partakers with me of grace.
In verse number 6, he says, I am confident that God is going to complete what He started with you. I'm confident God is going to be working with you just in your life, just from being faithful, just from working with me. God is going to accomplish what He wants to accomplish. He's going to complete it. And it might take time. Matter of fact, we'll get to this one. It will take time. It will take different experiences. It will take trials. It will take all those things. But He's going to work with you, and He's going to complete it in you. And so now when we consider some examples, what we've been doing, we've been going through the idea of the story of God. We've been looking at the Old Testament. We've been looking at Abraham. We've been looking at during the time of the children of Israel. We've been looking at Jesus. We've been looking at the Acts and the Apostles, the Epistles, and we've also been looking at Revelation, trying to take the whole scope of the story of God. How is God participating with us? What has He done? What does He continue to do? And I want to use 2 verses to actually show some of the things in the Old Testament. If you go back to Hebrews chapter 11, Daniel, if you can read Hebrews chapter 11, just read verse 7. This is right after we talked about Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please Him. He that comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. And we know Hebrews chapter 11 is really a series of examples of faith. Examples of faith. Now, when we're thinking about our lives, us today in 2025, our lives look different than they did in the Bible. But God is still the same, and we are still people. And so we're going to see some principles here that I believe are very relatable to us today. What does verse number 7 say?
By faith Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, and reverence prepared in the ark of the salvation of his household, but which he condemned the world. He became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith.
I want us to slow down. Now, I was very fortunate to hear a lot of Bible stories growing up. So sometimes when I read, these things aren't novel. Oh yeah, I know that story. No, never. Yeah. But God told Noah to build not a small little thing, but something massive. It took a lot of work. It took many years to do this. All for something that he never saw before. God told him, I'm going to flood the earth. I'm going to send rain. I'm going to open up the windows of heaven. I'm going to open up the floodgates of down below. I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to flood the earth. He'd never seen that before. But he still did. He trusted in God. He obeyed. Even though he didn't know what that was. And sometimes with us, if we don't know exactly what it is that we're trying to do, we just say, I'm sorry. If we don't know exactly, well, I don't think that's going to work. So we're not going to do it. But Noah did the opposite. He did it because he trusted in God. And I can just imagine, there was probably days, this is speculation, this is seeing him as a human being. There was probably some days where he was like, why am I doing this? He's in the middle of building and it's like, was that a dream? Am I crazy? But he still did it. What does verse number 8 say? Here's another one. Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 8. Go ahead, Daniel.
By faith Abraham obeyed, which he is called to go to a place that he has to receive an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going.
He went out not knowing where he was going. When I was talking about with me and my personal life, and I get frustrated. I get so frustrated when I don't understand something. To the point where I will pour, literally, I could pour 100% of myself into a topic just because I get so frustrated when I don't understand it. And here, Abraham moved his whole family to go somewhere where he's like, where are we going? Sky would get so frustrated with me because we'd be driving around and we don't know, we're trying to find somewhere to eat. And she's like, where are we going? We'll find something around here. We don't know. I don't have a destination in mind. I can only imagine Sarah and the whole family, the whole gang. Hey, we're packing up, we're moving. Where are we going? I don't know. I don't know. God told me to go this way. I don't know. And he still moved. And so when we think about things that we may not understand, and we may not know exactly how everything's going to pan out, we're talking about being faithful, trusting God in our everyday lives. That means trusting God, obeying. It means God is trying to do something and he wants you to be a part of it, and he knows what's going on, so do it. Trust him. And that's every single day. Every single day. Even if we don't understand, even if we don't get it, even if we don't know exactly how everything is going to pan out. Neither did Abraham. He didn't know where he was going, but he still obeyed. Why? Because he trusted in God. And he said he did that by faith. He was a faithful individual, example of a faithful individual. So now when we consider Jesus Christ, go to John chapter 12. John chapter 12. And as we're considering this, I want y'all to think with me for just a moment. Jesus prayed. When you think about our personal motivations for prayer, it typically ends up being we want something to happen, or something is now out of our control. And when you think about Jesus, I was thinking this morning, isn't it kind of weird that someone with that much power and that much knowledge still prayed? He still prayed. Look at John chapter 12. And we're showing this idea of him being faithful. John chapter 12. Start with me in verse number 20. It says, "Now there were some Greeks among those who were going up to worship at the feast. These then came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida of Galilee, and began to ask him, saying, 'Sir, we wish to see Jesus.' Philip came and told Andrew. Andrew and Philip came and told Jesus. And Jesus answered them, saying, 'The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life loses it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him.'" Now, when Jesus mentions, unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, is he just making some random agricultural lesson here? Like, that's random, okay, yeah. He's alluding to his own death. And Jesus in this moment is making the point, I'm going to have to do this, but it's going to produce much good. He knew what was going to happen, but he knew also the end of the story. Verse number 27, he said, "My soul has become troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose I came to this hour." This alludes to the point Jeremy was making in Bible class, in Esther. Hey, Esther, maybe God's working with this, and you're a part of this. With Philemon, hey, maybe Onesimus came to me so that good can be accomplished. And now he's going back. Just maybe. And here, Jesus knows what's about to happen, and he's basically making the point, am I going to ask God to take this away from me? To take this hardship away from me? I know what needs to happen. And when we think about us in our lives and our trust with God, oftentimes in our prayers, we are asking God to take things away. Take away pain. Take away suffering. Take away hardship. And don't get me wrong, God understands that. But Jesus stared death in the face and said, am I going to ask God to take this away from me? This is why I'm here. I'm going to still be faithful and trust in Him regardless. And even when we say be faithful, Jesus knew what was going to happen. But He still prayed. Go to Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. Start with me in verse number 36. It says, Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, Sit here while I go over there and pray. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is about to pray. Verse number 37. And He took with Him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and distressed. Then He said to them, My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. And He went a little beyond them and fell on His face and prayed, saying, My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet, not as I will, but as you will. Verse number 42, He went a second time, prayed again, My Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done. Jesus knew what was going to happen. But He said, your will be done. But Jesus was still deeply grieved. He still felt the inward turmoil. And it comes to a point sometimes, and maybe I've probably been guilty of this. Someone's going through a hard time. And what do we say? Did you pray about it? Did you pray? And there's a point where people say, yes, I prayed, and I feel the same. That's what happened to Jesus. He knew what was going to, and He even knew what was going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Jesus knew what was going to happen. He's still deeply grieved to the point of death. And He prays. And at the end of it, the solution was, I have to go through this. That was the solution. Did God hate Jesus? Was God away from Jesus? No. But Jesus said, this is your plan. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see it through. I'm not going to try to take a shortcut. I'm not going to try to elude it. And then He makes a point. I can call 10 legions of angels. I have the power to not have to go through this. But He still said, I'm going to go through it. Why? Because I am going to stick with God. I'm going to do what he wants me to do. Making an appeal to obedience. And sometimes it gets to a point where the point I'm trying to make here is we should be prayerful people. If that's not apparent. Jesus was prayerful, and he even had all knowledge, and he had the power, but he still prayed. We don't have that kind of knowledge. We don't have that kind of power. We should still pray. And even whenever Jesus was feeling this way, the prayer didn't take it away. It came to a point where he said, you have to go through it. And that's not a comfortable truth, but it's the reality. We talk about life being difficult, that's just the reality. So even Jesus was that way. Let's go to Acts chapter 12. Here's another one. Acts chapter 12. Relationship with God even through the difficult times. Being faithful to God even whenever things aren't the easiest. And I don't even say not the easiest, are flat out difficult. Look in Acts chapter 12. Start me in verse number 1. It says, now about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. Now this man Herod is just, let's just do it. Why not? Verse number 2. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. Apostles were being killed. Tough times for them. Verse number 3. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. Did Peter do anything? No. It was just simply, oh, this worked. Let's just do it again. Why not? And I don't mean to actually make this point. You know how like we say, okay, somebody out there always has a heart. That is true, but it doesn't take away our own trials. But I'll make this point. Here, this is nothing like we experience today. They were putting people to death just to make a group happy. Can you imagine? Now, this is not to be funny, but if they drug out Jared and killed him just because, to make some other people happy because he's a part of the church. But look at what the church's response here is. Read verse 24 first. And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to four squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. Verse number 5. So Peter was kept in the prison, but prayer for him was being made firmly by the church to God. I am ready for the day when something happens to a member of the church, or something happens that affects a member of the church, and we say, prayer meeting tonight. All of us. We're going to pray for this. All of us. Not just individually, but we're going to come together and we're going to pray for this person. We're going to pray for this situation. And what does that demonstrate? It demonstrates we're trusting in God. It's not this idea, well, nothing happens, so we're trusting in God. Our first response is not, our first response is prayer. And when we think about relationship with God, we're going to get to this more in just a moment. But God wants to hear from us. Something happens, their first thing that they did was pray. Look at Acts 16. Here's another one. Acts 16. Paul and Silas are out being evangelistic, and they cast out a demon out of a slave girl who was being exploited for her abilities, and their reward, they did something good, and their reward is being put in prison. And not just that, look what else they did, verse number 22. It says, the crowd rose up together against them, and the chief magistrates tore their robes off them, and proceeded to order them to be beaten with rods. They stripped their clothes off, and then ordered them to be beat up. Verse number 23. When they had struck them with many blows, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to guard them securely. And he, having received such a command, threw them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. And what is their response? Verse number 25. But about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns of praise to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. What is their first response? It's prayer and song. Prayer and song. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about being faithful. Being faithful. We can be here, but whenever tragedy strikes on a Tuesday at noon, our response ought to be prayer and song. It could be prayer and song. Why not? Our first thought is, Lord, I'm still here with you. And I know you're still here with me, even though this happens. But oftentimes, we let these things check us out. We let it check us out. But that's not the response of the early church. Now here, consider this one. Baker, if you can get Proverbs chapter 30. You know this one. Verses 8 and 9. Not only is it the case that life can be difficult, life can be good. And even with just us being here as a representation that life has its good. We're sitting in an AC building with people here that love us. Honestly, what more can you ask? You know, not just the AC, but you have people here that love us. Life can be good. And for some, life can be really good. I mean, you're just on a high, everything's going great, your kids are doing great, money's good, you got food in the fridge, everything's just great. Look what that says, Proverbs chapter 30, verse number 8 and 9.
Remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of the Lord.
He says, don't make me too rich. Don't give me too much, because then I'm just going to forget you. And unfortunately, in the comforts of America, and we are extremely materialistic, and we like our things, and we like our comforts, we can forget God if we're not careful. We can forget God. We can be mentally checked out because things are so good. How many times have you seen someone make a prayer of thanksgiving? I knew a lady that she started getting sick, and when she was sick, she was there on the second pew every Sunday. She got better, she was gone. Sometimes when life is good, we forget God. And God is, the way I picture it, God is, I'm still here. And even, I'm the one that blessed you with that. I'm still here. But we let these things distract us. And we let these things cause us to forget Him. So we're talking about being faithful. Whenever James talks about if any is afflicted, let him pray. But if any's married, let him sing. You can sing on a Tuesday afternoon. And God hears that. That's possible. And as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about in this afternoon, that's actually a sign that you are really trying to be close with God. On a Tuesday afternoon, unsolicited, I'm glad, you know what? I thank God for the day. Relationship with God. Being faithful. Staying in relation with God. So as we conclude, go to Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2. We're going to bookend this. Not only do we want to be faithful to God, staying and trusting with Him in relationship with Him when times are not so good, but even when times are good, and we see that God is working with us. Philippians chapter 2, look at me in verse number 12. It says, so then, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is who? God, who is at work in you, both to will and work for His good pleasure. even whenever we don't understand what is going on in our own lives. What was it, Taylor Swift? I think it was Taylor Swift. She just take the wheel. Even whenever it's a sense in which it's like, I feel like everything is out of our control, out of my control. Can we still trust in God? I'm sorry, I apologize. Can we still trust in God? Can we still trust Him? Do we still believe that He is working with us and in us for His good pleasure? And it's times whenever, now one piece of good advice I did get from marriage is, the hard times make you better. Can it not be the case that God knows this difficult time, this trial, where money's low, is going to make you more appreciative of things that you have? Probably. Whenever things happen with our loved ones, with our kids, that it causes us to have a better mentality, yeah. God is still working with us and in us, and He wants us to trust Him, even whenever we don't get what's going on. And so when James talks about, in James chapter 1, I believe it's verses 26 and 27, yep. James chapter 1, 26 and 27, talking about a person who does not bridle his tongue, this person's religion is vain. And then he would talk about pure religion, undefiled religion. Visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and keep yourself unspotted from the world. Is it the case that we demonstrate pure religion just when times are good? But even whenever life is difficult, and we can't really focus all the time, we can still practice pure religion. We can still be faithful to God. And we can still trust Him. And God wants us to do that. Why? Because He is working with us. And sometimes, whenever we mentally check out, we are just working against God. Work with God. And when we think about the cross of Jesus Christ, as we mentioned during the Lord's Supper, the suffering that Christ had to go through, He knew it all. He knew all the beatings. He knew all the hammer nails. He knew all the thorns I was going to go. He knew all that. All the slap, all that. All of it. And in the end, He said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. He went down, still recognizing it was the Father's plan. And Philippians chapter 2, we'll talk about He was obedient. He was obedient. And that blood allows us to have a relationship with God. And allows us to be faithful on Tuesday afternoon. Not just it does allow us to be here, absolutely. But it allows us to be able to pray to God when times are difficult. And it allows us to be able to pray prayers of thanksgiving when times are great. I want to encourage us, let's be faithful. Let's be faithful. Let's be faithful unto death. And it does not just mean being here, it means being mentally engaged and involved. It means praying on a Tuesday afternoon. It means singing on a Saturday morning. It means inquiring of God, seeking Him, still asking those questions, even though they're difficult. Still considering, what would Christ do in this situation? How would God feel in this situation? What is something that I'm not doing that He has outlined for me to do, that I just haven't made mental space for in my life? Seeking God. And He's going to work on us. And in the due time, when God is done with us, He will accomplish what He wants to accomplish with us. But we have to allow Him. We have to be faithful. That's the message. Hope you're encouraged. If you have any needs, come down as we stand there.